This chapter is titled Methods of Progression and will prove either the most intriguing and exciting and engaging topic of information to go over, or it may prove a lot of stuff that you're just not interested in. So it's included because it's, as I had said leading up to this in the prior chapter's video, it's the heart and soul, it's the DNA of how a system lives and breathes. And if your job is to interface with the contractor, the sub, the architect, the owner, and the factory, you need to know the genetic code of what the factory's doing, and maybe just being aware of other ways to harvest biddings and being able to refer back to reference documents, really good documents, really good books written on the subject by established, recognized experts, could likely be good enough for you to be able to speak on an intelligent level with the factory. I'm sure that I say somewhere in this chapter that I get a bidding list back from the factory, and it's nice to be able to see on there what they did. The ability to look at a bidding list and know what was done and how it was done is a true locksmith's stock in trade, because locksmiths will inherit systems, and when they get that bidding list, they can look at it and know the method of progression because it's undeniable how it was done. Either it followed an organized structure or it didn't. Okay, I think true experts in the field would be able to they absolutely can decode how a system was done, and it may or may not have logical repeatability, but that lack of logical repeatability is the repeatability. It's a shoebox system where there's no logic at all in terms of what biddings were selected. But you have to be able to have an organized structure to your biddings in order for you to wield the power of the standard progression format. To this point, everything has been total position progression. As it turns out, it's not the system that likely you ought to be using. And in fact, it's not ever the system that I'm using when I'm keying locks myself. If I'm creating a bidding list for someone to key some locks, and it's a one-off system, and we know that it is, and it's 12 cylinders, it's going to be limited position progression. We're gonna have one or two chambers that progress, two or three maybe, and everything else is going to be constant. It's not going to be total position progression where you have a master in every chamber. Again, that's the hallmark of it, because it doesn't need it. It's less secure with it, and it's less work on my guy who's pinning the locks when he doesn't have to drop master pins where they don't need to be. So all this work in total position progression has really been to give you, here's the foundation of progression. Now, play with these rules on top of what you already know. Here are the benefits of altering it. And once you learn, if you choose to dive deeper into it, once you know methods of progression, you can say, this is the method of progression that best suits my client's objectives. Sometimes that's total position progression. In my experience with small and medium-sized jobs, it never is the best way to go. And that's all there is to it. So let's see if there's anything else that I want to mention as I just quickly scan the chapter. Well, I can see that I want to start with the introduction by saying we're going to go over 6 methods of progression. Total position progression, we're just going to touch on it. Rotating constant, you may have heard of that. That's the big one. That's the one that you're probably going to use. Limited position progression. It's just a variant of rotating constant, I suppose. The matrix format is less a method of progression as much as it is a format by which to pull biddings out. Selective master keying, you'll probably never encounter that, but you might encounter a component or a hallmark of selective master keying. And then lastly, shoebox method. Imagine a shoebox full of random keys, and some locksmith pulls those out. It's interesting, today I had a conversation with a locksmith in New York, was doing a lot of Verizon stores in New York, and it wasn't Verizon. I'm just saying Verizon to give you a context. In New York, it was Manhattan, I'll say that. And this locksmith is out there and he's discovering all this awful stuff that the locksmiths that preceded him. And when we went over multiplex keyways, we talked a lot about not cutting biddings for change keys on multi-section blanks. Well, they were doing that. There was dozens of these stores. In fact, there may have been 100 or more. And the control key, they were using a multi-section blank for the control key. And that's handy because if you've got keys, keyways, and using one control key to pass all those different keyways on the cylinders, that's handy. That's in alignment with what's going on. Probably the better way to do it would be to simply master key at the control shear line, which is how a large electronics, national chain of electronics stores does it. Because they want to be able to use a control key just for a facility, and then one control key will govern an entire district of these stores. And he, in the process, discovered just keys and biddings that were completely random. You can kind of get away with that in A2 small format, but sooner or later you're going to run into incidental keys that will and can and do certainly theoretically work in cylinders that they shouldn't. It's not best practice. Is anyone going to take the key from this store and go into a random store 3 miles away and go to the right door and try it? No, of course not. Is it correct for you to be a part of a system that allows that? No, of course not. So we're going to talk about shoebox method only in the sense that you'll say that you'll never engage in it. And then we just dive into each of those 6 on a per level basis. I'm going to introduce something called the Pascal's triangle. It was used heavily in the class that I had taken earlier this year. And it's a nice cheat sheet, as is dividing the key. It's a nice way to quickly reference, hey, can I do this? And I don't think there's anything proprietary about the Pascal's triangle that was here. It's the same. It is the document from the Aloha class. I can't, if they have an issue with sharing that information, I'm sure they'll let me know. But I highly doubt that there's any problem with that. And Aloha probably doesn't own that document. Maybe they do. If they don't want us to use it, we'll certainly do something else. I'll reference a book that's in here regarding rotating constant that I read to the point of my eyes tearing because it's just a lot. Rotating constant is an extremely deep rabbit hole to go down, and we're going to make you aware of what it does, how to do it, and then it'll be your responsibility if you want to dig deeper and find all of the derivative or all the variant ways that rotating constant is deployed. Yeah, so that is that. I've just scanned through this chapter. Let's switch to the screen view and let's take a dive. In closing, this is going to be an epic chapter. This will be 2 hours long, probably. After that, it's all downhill. Small little chapters, neat little topics, quick, and if you're going through this, you'll be done at that point. So let's dive in. Methods of progression. This chapter titled Methods of Progression is the longest of this primer, and I apologize in advance as brevity is a skill that has eluded me in writing this. In my defense, the method of progression is the heart and soul of a key system, and as such requires a thorough review. Sure, good master key selection is extremely important, but the method by which you create biddings is where you showcase your underlying locksmithing skills. Everyone learns TPP, but as this chapter aims to prove, it is most likely not the best choice for your use. As I stated initially, we learn TPP as I feel it is easiest to initially learn, but easiest is rarely best. That's just a life lesson that we all know. As you well know by now, this primer is based on the method of progression called total position progression, known as TPP for short. Earlier in this primer, we have used TPP as the cornerstone of our discussion and examples. We have only done so as it is likely the most common method of progression a learner might naturally conceive if studying locksmithing and generating change key biddings on their own. I know it was for me. I recall when I had a moment of discovery. Long before I had anyone to teach me locksmithing, I had learned the hard way that if change keys shared cuts with the master key, you had a chance, a guarantee is a more apt term, of cross-keying. The term I used at the time for when keys might operate, not cylinders, operate cylinders. They were supposed not to work, which we now know as interchange. So I called it cross-keyed. That's a good term for it. It works. It's just cross-keyed is something you do voluntarily. Controlled or uncontrolled cross-keying. You do that intentionally. Key interchange is not intentional, and what I had was interchange or ghost keys. Therefore, I knew to watch out for this and not to do it. I decided it was best if I simply never used a cut from the master key when creating change key biddings. And I've mentioned it in the past, and I would use a cut from the master, and I had stuff working places that it shouldn't, and I realized, well, just don't do that. Make every change key share nothing in common with the master, and voila, you have total position progression. I decided it was simply best if I never used a cut from the master key when creating change key biddings. I realized I needed a method of creating these biddings. I had to come up with a way of doing it, whether it was a 3-flat, where I was going to have literally 3 change keys in a master, or I was going to do a job of 12 cylinders, or maybe of 30. I needed some way to actually do that. I was working on Schlag. Schlag, being in Chicago, Schlag is everywhere. Every lock is everywhere there. Arrow is everywhere. Well, you'll bump into it. Corbin Russwin in certain areas. You're going to run into that. Obviously, the quick sets of the world. Anyway, I realized I needed a method of creating these biddings. I was working on Schlag, and I knew I had to be at least 2 cuts away from any successive cut, and noticed it would be most economical if I was always 2 cuts away from every other cut, therefore getting 4 cuts in each chamber. So if you think about the 10 depths in a Schlag system, and if you want to cram the most amount of possible cuts in each chamber, you keep them all 2 away. Now you can keep them all 3 away, but you're not going to get 4 progression possibilities. You can keep them all 4 away, and you'll get 1 progression possibility, and that's all. If you're only creating 5 change keys, that would work. The point I'm making there is a thicker master pin is a more reliable lock. So the most economical was always to keep 2 cuts away from every other cut, therefore getting 4 cuts in each chamber. Then in my head popped the image of an odometer. I remember I was standing at the key bench thinking how to do this, and I realized, well, wait a minute, an odometer works exactly this way. If I created change keys the same way an odometer worked, I could methodically create change biddings and never duplicate, as it's impossible to duplicate, mileage on an odometer. I mean, short of recycling and starting again, whatever, the vehicle goes to 1,000,000, then back to zeros. I had in my mind and quite innocently narrow a view of the world, discovered a method of progression that worked absolutely for creating change keys. I felt like Einstein must have felt. I did that all on my own. It turns out, as I later learned, the entire world knew about TPP for decades upon decades. Though I don't feel my discovery was any less magnificent. I just didn't know there was a name for it. We start with PPP, as in my opinion, TPP is the easiest to learn, at least initially. I also believe that learning TPP first allows you to have a solid foundation from which you can then learn the more advanced techniques of methods of progression. It's a good home base to start from, I believe, is what I'm trying to say. You might consider this the basics, and of course learning the basics is where one ought to start. However, it is also my opinion and supreme fact that TPP does not best accommodate the requirements of the project in most instances. Where this chapter begins is not where it will end up. My intent with this chapter is to recognize what you have learned and then show you multiple paths to a better method. Let's learn about the other ways to progress. There are 6 of them, and let's name them. We have total position progression, TPP, rotating constant, RC, limited position progression, LPP, matrix format. Again, probably not a method of progression, but you'll find it very intriguing. We won't go on into it very long, but I'll let you know where to go to if you really want to dive into it. Selective master keying and shoebox method. So it is vital to start with the governing document, which is ANSI A156.28. If you're going to play in the world of keys and cylinders, come hook or crook, I would suggest that you get a copy of that. So in the ANSI standard, it states in section 5 under the heading titled Progression, master keying progression varies widely when different cylinder mechanisms are used. The method of master keying progression should be selected to create the minimum number of incidental master keys. So they use the term master. I think they could just say incidental, but when you've got a key working multiple cylinders, it's either an SKD or it's a master key, right? So when you've got a key working multiple cylinders, you've got something that's in effect acting like a master, while still reaching the desired system expansion. So let's start over. The method of master keying progression should be selected to create the minimum number of incidental master keys while still reaching the desired system expansion. Correct progression results in no duplication of key combinations and no key interchange. So obviously when you have a methodical way of creating biddings, you're not going to reuse biddings. You can't. The odometer won't let you. But the key is to pun intended, is to not get key interchange. And that's when you have a key, and as I said earlier, in apartment 8 working in apartment 6, and that's a major problem. Locksmithing lawsuits, not suites. Suit claims Google's listings for unlicensed locksmiths. How to sue a locksmith in small claims court. Lawsuits trade blame for keymakers' troubles. Interesting lawsuit. Locksmith ledger. A victim is reported suing both the manufacturer of the deadbolt and Home Depot where the lock was purchased. Locksmith locked out. Court affirms immunity. Marshall's Locksmith Service v. Google. Okay, what are you suing Google for? Can I sue a locksmith for damaging my property? Anyway, it doesn't take a lot of research to find lawsuits that involve locksmiths. Key interchange could land you there, that's for sure. Random key biddings must never be used in a key system. In a conventional pin tumbler cylinder, this is accomplished by using the fewest possible master pins per cylinder. So that's the governing passage. In a conventional pin tumbler cylinder, in any pin tumbler cylinder, in any tumbler lock, using the fewest possible master pins per cylinder. That, because it's in the ANSI standard, is exactly why this chapter is necessary. Because your obligation is to use the fewest possible master pins. TPP does not give you that. So TPP automatically is not best practice in many instances. The key passages are highlighted. The method of master keying should be selected to create the minimum number of incidentals using the fewest possible master pins per cylinder. If you plan to work even occasionally in master keying or locksmithing in general, I recommend purchasing the standard. It's a unique reference document, and you will refer back to it throughout your career. I know that I do. Let's talk about the first highlighted section, should be selected. The standard is saying the way by which we determine the method of master keying progression we select must be such that we create the least unfavorable overall conditions for within which that system will exist. This chapter is all about the different methods available to us to progress the mechanics of our key system to suit the end user's requirements. Of the different methods of progression, it turns out TPP is the biggest offender of the two above highlighted maxims. Ralph Forrest Ball, CML, states TPP is fairly inefficient, those were his words, I believe, and he has calculated the total number of incidental keys in a 6-pin, 2-step, 10-depth system at 11,529 on top of the 4,096 theoretical keys it will produce. So, that's another reason why this chapter is pretty important. Ralph goes on to state these thousands of additional incidental master keys, or IMKs, represent vulnerabilities inherent in our system. TPP is the most egregious violator of the ANSI standard when used in those systems that could be done more elegantly, using an alternate method of progression. Why is this true? Simply because we're adding a master pin in every chamber. As proved earlier, this creates the most, not the minimum, incidental keys, and uses the most, not the fewest, master pins per cylinder. This is also completely true that one might conclude, why I learn first the method that is not the best possible to use. So what I'm just trying to say there is, this is so completely true that you might say, well, why teach it to me in the first place? Well, one must start somewhere, though I will leave that up to you to decide. It will be shown how alternative methods of progression are likely superior, and once your knowledge of total pin progression is firm enough, I would very much encourage you to expand out and experiment with the following alternate methods of progression. In short, I'm saying learn total pin progression, as everyone who studies locksmithing must possess the skill, but realize in the interest of not only adhering to the ANSI standard but advocating on behalf of your client's best interest, you'll likely be conducting progressions using a more elegant, more powerful method, just as the factories do. I sent an order to Dorma I did a large job in Texas, 600, 800 doors. A fella bought an office building, like a 20-story office building, and he changed all the doors and wanted a good quality grade 2 cylindrical lock. And Why not? There's lots of choices, and used Dorma's. I'd have to look at the catalog. They're whatever it is, CL something, and I got the bidding list from the factory, and I looked at it and said, "Huh, rotating constant, very cool." They were just all 2-level, 1 AA through 800 AA, so no big deal, just keyed differently. And you're going to see when we look at Pascal's triangle that they didn't need to put a master pin in every chamber. They just rotated a constant. So it was great to see it. And they never asked me if that's what I wanted. There would be no reason for Dorma to say, "Hey, do you want us to use rotating constant?" There'd be no reason for them to ask. I want 800 locks. I want one master, and they're all keyed different. That's what the guy wants. Yeah, we've talked about it. That's what the requirement is. So their mandate is to do it in accordance with the ANSI standard. And they did. They kept the number of masters to a minimum and used the method of progression that would serve those needs. So in short, I'm saying that learn total pin progression, as everyone who studies locksmithing must possess this skill, but realize, in the interest of not only adhering to the ANSI standard, but advocating on behalf of your client's best interest, you'll likely be conducting progressions using a more elegant, more powerful method, just as the factories do. This primer will stop short of teaching you to pin cylinders using these alternative methods, but give you a working knowledge of these methods, allowing you to communicate to the factories more clearly. I find it almost joyful to receive a bidding list from a major lock factory and review the biddings out of curiosity and understand what method of progression they used. Furthermore, possessing this skill will allow you to decode the work of another locksmith far easier. Possessing the knowledge is a liberating position to be in. To review, TPP uses a master pin in every chamber. You can never use a TMK cut as a progression possibility, and is capable of producing, better than the alternative methods, key systems larger than 3 levels. And when you have a system so large, a system that demands thousands of keys spread over multiple levels, and possibly multiple keyways, where your system will require a master pin in every chamber, the bottom line is super large systems are going to probably require a master pin in every chamber. In these systems, the other issue is really multi-level systems. When you deploy rotating constant, if you're doing a 2-level system, you'll see rotating constant will give you far more changes than total position progression. But as you get past level 3, level 4, the way in which you have to wield rotating constant severely reduces the number of available biddings, and that's the problem with. So why TPP is the worst one to use? You're saying, why ever use it? Well, because if you have a level 4 system, you will likely not get the biddings you need in a large system without using TPP. We have used TPP throughout this primer and please refer back to it if need be. So I'm not going to go into it. I'm not going to talk any more about it. We've gone over the KBA. You know how to progress, and that's just where that is. So let's start with rotating constant. Okay, here's where the rubber meets the road. To move forward, let's discuss rotating constant, abbreviated as RC, and was at one time called hold and vary. Though this term has fallen out of favor, I only mention it as I've seen it referred to on an ALOA PRP or proficiency exam. If you ever go on to take ALOA sponsored exams, just know that if you see the term hold and vary, know that they're referring to rotating constant. There's going to be a question that says, what method is hold? I'm not telling you what the question is because I don't remember. But the question is, hey, it's hold and vary. What method of progression is it? It's rotating constant, and that will be listed in every book that you ever read about rotating constant. Yeah, why are they doing that? Okay, what is rotating constant? The KBA is the same structure. So the key bitting array that you're going to build is the same key bitting array. You're going to draw the horizontal lines and put your TMK at the top and your sequence of progression at the bottom. The process of progression is the same. Observing the manufacturer's rules for quantity of depths and step, increment, and max are all the same. There are two rules. The first rule of rotating constant. In RC, you never use master pins in all chambers. You will have a chamber that will never have master pins. Now I said you will have a chamber. I didn't tell you you're going to have chamber 1 or 2 or 6 or 7 or whatever. You will have a chamber. This means that in at least one chamber, the change key will have a cut the same as the TMK. This is an absolute rule. So all of a sudden we've taken TPP and turned it on its head. We just did the opposite of everything we've said don't do. While TPP is capable of producing very large quantities of change keys, as it turns, RC has TPP easily beat in the quantity of bittings it can produce, and in all instances will use fewer master pins, which makes the cylinder more physically secure and reduces the amount of incidental keys. That statement is not absolute. There will be, beyond level 3, you're going to use total position progression. But in most systems that you and I are going to encounter, RC is probably going to be the way to go. The second rule, every key in the system must have the same quantity of cuts that share the TMK cut. So that's a confusing thing. Meaning, if you create a system where you have one cut, or you create a system that has 2 cuts, or you create a system that has 3 cuts, on and on and on, then every change key in the system must have the same number of cuts in common with the TMK. Now, how would you know whether to have 1 cut in common, or 2, or 3, or 4? That answer is easily understood once we get there, and is based on how big the system needs to be, how big your expansion specification needs to be. And you'll make a decision on how many chambers will have the same cut as the TMK. And I'm going to show you the Pascal's triangle, and then you'll say, this is easy. I just need to know where to find this triangle. So the point is if you have a system that has 3 cuts in common with the TMK, every single bitting must have 3 cuts in common with the KBA, but because it's rotating, they don't have to be in the same place. They can jump around. I know that is a mind blow, but it's absolutely true, and we're going to show you why. There's only one of us here. Now I'm speaking out, me and my imaginary friend. So every change key in the system must have the same number of cuts in common with the TMK. If you're using 2 from the master if you're using 2 cuts from the master key bitting as a bitting in your change keys, then all the change keys must have 2 of the TMK bittings in the change key. I'm saying the same number of cuts, though, and here's the cool part, meaning these cuts are not required to be in the same location all the time, hence the rotating and rotating constant. Examples to follow. RC is extremely well suited for 2-level systems. It can be done for 3-level systems. I had a locksmith in Volusia County, Florida, and he just called me up and said, "Can you make me a bidding list?" And I thought, "Yeah, I can." You're a locksmith. I was thinking in my head, "You're a locksmith. Do you need me to do that?" It turns out that the term locksmith is a term that's applied to to people that are at some level engaged in locks, keys, and cylinders, but it's it's a journey, and you're a locksmith with 1 year experience, and you're a locksmith with 51 years of experience. This locksmith didn't have yet the skill set to give himself what he needed in terms of a bidding list. And I was able to give him a really tight, based on his requirement. I used a rotating constant system for a 3-level system, and it is it's an advanced locksmithing technique that requires study, but it allowed me to build him a really beautiful key system. No possibility of interchange. Gave him the size he needed with the expansion specification we discussed, and petite, the minimum number of master pins. So RC is extremely well suited for 2-level systems. It can be done for 3-level systems, but might be impractical for 4-level systems. I couldn't tell you how to do it in a 4-level system, as the system expansion capacity would be quite limited. A standout benefit, and the reason is you've got the cuts jumping around that are in common with the TMK. A standout benefit of rotating constant is you reduce master pins and increase security. In fact, every time you add a master pin, you double the amount of incidental master keys. Conversely, every time you remove a master pin, you cut the number of incidental master keys that operate the cylinder. And it is in this very fact that RC shines. And Ralph Forrest Ball, CML, said those words. Every time you add a master pin, you're doubling the amount of incidentals. On the other hand, every time that you remove one, you cut it in half. So if you take a total position progression system and just make one chamber constant in a rotating constant, you remove one master pin, you've substantially reduced how many incidentals there are. Just by not designing a master pin into a chamber. Our approach in reviewing here in this primer is to present it in the context of a 2-level system. Rotating constant can be used in 3-level systems to great effect. I'm duplicating myself, but I just wrote a system for a client where the expansion specification was 1/610, and rotating constant for this 3-level system was my method of choice. I could pull it up. I think I could find it. I will find it. Let me finish this paragraph. Rotating constant can also be done in 4 levels, but RC in 3 and 4-level systems is advanced master keying, best taught by the experts at ALOA. Again, the advantage to RC as a method of progression is you reduce the number of master pins in the cylinders, therefore reducing the number of incidental keys that will work the cylinder in addition to those keys you intend to work in the cylinder in the first place. We call it a constant when the cut of the change key is the same cut as in the same chapter as the chamber as the TMK. Let's dive in deeper. Let me see if I can find that key system I wrote. Okay, so I did find the bidding list, and here we go. So I created the bidding list, and this is what I sent to the client, and I'm refreshing my memory as to what it was. The expansion specification was 1/610. I know that I said that. So we have 6 master keys. We have 10 changes down here, and a TMK. So we have and this is jumping ahead, but because it's rotating constant, the expansion specification told me that I could have, he was doing a 5-pin system. Doesn't matter, what key system it is, who's the manufacturer. It's obviously 2-step when you look at it. The quantity of keys that they required only made me have one chamber that rotated. So I was doing, I was holding constant 4 chambers because the quantity of keys he needed were quite small. He only needed 10 keys. But he needed 6 masters. So I came up with a TMK 04752, and so we have here two 44752, 44752, 64752, and 84752. Those are my first 4 masters. Then because I needed 6 masters, I went 06752, 08, 02, pardon me, 0002752. So this is my master key register right here. Okay. So because this is level 3, it's advanced locksmithing. And basically, between chambers 2 and 3 is where the barrier is. Okay, everything to the left is just for master keys. Everything to the right can be for change keys. I think actually what happened here is I probably progressed these 2 chambers and then left the 3rd chamber not touched, because then I could elevate that chamber to either master keys or to change keys. So when you're dealing with rotating, I see what I did. What did I do? Yeah, no, we're fine. Okay, so we have a master key register. We have our TMK. So I took my AA key. Here it is. Here's my KBA. Here's my TMK for that master key. It's not the TMK, but in my KBA, it's in the position of TMK. I then progressed chambers 4 and 5, and I left constant chambers 1, 2, and 3. I've got my sequence of progression. So basically, I then progressed, and if you recall, with 2 chambers like this, I could get 16 change keys. So I used my master key biddings constant. 3 chambers are in common. All of my change keys have 3 chambers in common with the master. Okay. So I rotated these 2 columns, and he only needed 10 change keys. Our expansion is down here of the additional, what would be the additional 5 changes if there are no max violations. I don't see any. And that's how I built a rotating constant for a 3-level system. And all the biddings are the same, 7.6, 7.8, 7.0, all the way through. AD7, 798, 798, 798, 798. And really all we're changing is, well, these are the first 4 masters. If we go over here, it'll change. 84798, 64798. There's only, we're under its master key. So these are always going to be constant with the master key, these little circles. The point is that his cylinders are indeed using the least amount of master pins. You're going to have a master pin in chambers 4 and 5. Let's just look at here, because we got the TMK. You're going to have master pins in chambers 4 and 5. You're going to have a master pin in chamber 1 to make the TMK work. But that's it. And in fact, it's like the TMK is actually a selective key, because we are not using the 0 in any of our KBAs, and we're only programming it in or adding the 0 bottom and the 2 master. It's like it's a selective key. So pretty cool in that regard. You can do it pretty petitely. I hope that wasn't boring, but hey, listen, it takes time and study to be able to do that, and we've got to get ourselves reoriented here. Yeah, okay, I think we're in good shape. So, let's dive deeper. That was the deeper. That was the intro to the deeper dive. So we've seen a real live example of it. Now, using our prior study of the KBA, using TPP, you learned how many keys a given KBA can yield. The example KBA we used is seen here again. This is the same shooting match that we've already seen. Okay. This is the one we've been using. Down here, we're going to talk about how big the system can get. Time to dive deeper. I'm going to let's do that right now. Okay, let's dive deeper. As we already know, there are 6 chambers and 4 progression possibilities per chamber. The math to calculate the total number of keys this KBA will yield is 4 to the 6th power. Just remember, it's quantity of progressives, and then the exponent is the number of chambers. There are 4 progression possibilities in 6 positions, therefore 4 to the 6th, blah, 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 4096. We've covered that. Now, this, let's see here now. This same logic works for all pin tumbler cylinders, such as Kwikset, small format, Medico, Corbin, System 70, pre-System 70, whatever. Corbin System 70 is a single-step system where you have cut depths 1 through 6, and therefore there will be 5 progression possibilities. Let's even make this example more interesting and say that this is a 7-pin cylinder. It's a Z and DH class, as seen on page 62 of the Corbin Russwin cylinder manual, as seen here. Page 62. All right, there's the depth and spacing data for System 70, Z and DH class. Applies to all these keyways. There's your max, there's your increment, there are your depths, single step. I believe I have touched on this manual in a prior chapter. If you ever work in anything Corbin or Russwin related, this manual is truly indispensable. It's the most comprehensive document written by a lock manufacturer that governs all of the facts and figures regarding their system from anyone ever in the history of American lock manufacturing. Medico publishes a lot of stuff, but Medico hasn't been in business since the 19th century, which makes this document pretty cool. I'll show you where to find it, and I'm sure that I have previously. So from my website, if you were to just type in Corbin, search on any item, get to the manufacturer's page, Corbin cylinder manual is right here. Okay, that's how you find it, should you ever need to find it. So just showing you the data that I'm referring to. If we were to build a KBA for that, where we have 5 progression possibilities, where we have 5 progression possibilities in 7 chambers, it's 5 to the 7th. That's a big number. 5 to the 7th is 78,125. There ought to be some discussion, and I'm sure that there is elsewhere, about, master keying reduces security in that prior chapter. Well, because we had opened up that manual, I just want to, and this is an intellectual exercise only. The problem with incidental keys is that you have masters and change keys sharing a single shear line. But with Corbin's master ring, and I'm going to show you the section. Here it is. Yeah, okay, master ring. If this looks unusually large, it should, because it is. It's an 1.5 inch diameter. Yes, I just said 1.5 inch diameter. And this is the plug, the cylinder plug, and this is the master ring. You pin your change keys to the shear plug line. You pin all your masters up here. What you're doing, and you use a build-up pin to get there. It's like small format in that regard. But the Corbin system is even easier, using negative, 0, and positive build-up pins. It's really easy once you go through it. This manual would teach you how to do it. Because you're isolating those shear lines from each other, you don't have incidentals. And this lock technology, patented in about 1889, somewhere in that area, solved this problem 125 years ago, more than that. Anyway, if you wanted to do a super deep dive on something really cool. So 78,125 possible change keys, and that KBA would look like this. There's your sequence of progression. We've got a G added because we had to get out to a 7th position. Okay, just sit here and study it for a minute, I suppose. In the A column, which would be, chamber 7, the TMK is 2. We got 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1. Those are your possibilities, your progressions. You will notice we changed our TMK to be a correct TMK for a Corbin System 70. There is no 9. There's nothing bigger than 6 is what I'm driving at. Cuts 1 through 6 only. We added a row to account for our 5 progression possibilities. We added a row. And we added a column for our 7th pin chamber. The point being, as you look at the KBA, you can immediately determine how many change keys a given KBA can yield. Grasping this is required to understand the power of the rotating constant method of progression. So what I'm saying here is you already know, based on total position progression, that you can figure out how many changes a key bitting array will produce, theoretically. And when someone says theoretically, that just means every raw number. Now, every raw number you won't use as a bitting. Okay, this system is going to produce a key that's 111111. You're not going to use that. It's going to produce a change key that's 111111. You won't use that key, nor will you use well, everything else is in the change key, is in the TMK, but you're probably not going to use 5555 Okay, you're not going to use those keys, so you're going to lose a lot. So theoretical just means the raw number. How much is the gross number? Yeah, gross and net. You've got gross, and then you've got net. It's required to understand this for total position progression, but it's super required to know it as well for rotating constant. Let's dive even deeper. In the following KBA, I only progress one chamber using our original two-step 10 depth cuts 0 through 9. how many keys will this KBA, how many change keys will this KBA produce? Oops. Sorry, just trying to get it centered a little bit better. How many change keys will this produce? Well, it's four progressions to the first power because there's only one chamber. The answer is 4. Using what we have learned, the answer is 4, as we have 4 progression possibilities in just one chamber. So it's 4 to the first power. Okay. Let's do another example, and there's a reason that we're easing into this. How many keys will this KBA yield? Well, same logic. 4 to the second power. You already know this. Using what we have learned, this answer is 16. 4 to the second, or 4 times 4 is 16. Let's do another example. This is going to be 4 to the third power. Okay, that's 64. Using what we have learned, the answer is 64, as we have four progression possibilities in 3 chambers. You can now carry out the same logic for 4, 5, 6 chambers to get 256 for 4 chambers, 1024 for 5, 496 for 6 chambers. Let's move forward. Allow me to present a KBA where we are progressing 2 chambers but tweaked for the rotating constant progression. So all I tweaked it with was adding these little circles in the empty areas, and I don't have any sequence of progression for those chambers that we're going to leave alone. The only tweaking that we've done is that we've put small circles in the first 4 chambers, and all that means is that the first 4 cuts of every key are going to have the same identical cut as the TMK. Chambers 5 and 6 are like every other KBA we've put together so far. We know from our prior study that we will get 16 keys from this KBA. And I'm going to progress them just to show you. So these are the keys: 470541, 43, 45, 47, 470541, 470543, 45, 47. And I've progressed all 16 of them so you can study it. Now let's take our first leap. This is what rotating constant is all about. We're going to rotate a column. There you go. All I did, other than zoom back in, is I took this column, made it constant, and I moved it over here. Now I progress chamber 4. So the question is, and it's not a trick question, how many keys will I get from this key bitting array? I'll get 16. 4 to the second power, because there are 2 chambers that we're progressing. All I did was in the above KBA was move column B from the 5th to the 4th position. No big deal, as this is literally what rotating constants is all about. The leap of faith one must make or take is to embrace the supreme fact that none, and I mean none, of the keys from the first KBA, where we have constants in chambers 1 through 4, are the same keys as the second KBA. Allow me to progress the change keys from KBA 2. Now I've progressed all of them, and if you take these 16 keys and you put them next to these 16 keys, none of them are the same. None. That is a supreme fact. The most important concept to embrace is that there is no interchange between the keys from KBA 1 and KBA 2. Study all those keys closely. If you need a system of one master key, study all those keys closely. Okay, let's period. If you need a system of one master key and 32 change keys, you now have it without key interchange. You have used 128 less master pins, making the cylinders more secure, with 0 possibility of interchange. So if you're doing a small system of 32 keys, which this KBA will give you 16, then you create another KBA in your same system for another 16. You cut all those keys. You don't use total position progression, so you don't put master pins in any of these chambers or in any of these chambers. You have far less master pins, far, less incidentals, right? And a far more secure cylinder. You've not only that, but the time it takes to combinate these cylinders is now faster. If you're dropping pins in cylinders and you only have to drop 2 masters rather than 5 or 6 times 32, it's a lot. It's a lot of time. The key concept here is that in TPP there is but one KBA. The key concept here is in rotating constant. For every instance where you rotate a constant, you create a new KBA, but you keep all the old ones. So now your system isn't comprised of one KBA, it's comprised of the number of KBAs that you create based on how many times you move a column around or rotate a constant. So when we're rotating a constant, it's like the flow of electricity. You think it goes in one direction because electrons move in that direction. Well, how it really works is when an electron moves from left to right, it actually leaves a void which forces another electron to move in the opposite direction to fill that void. So the electricity actually flows in reverse, kind of. So when I rotate a constant, I took the constant from here and I rotated it to here, which forces these pins to get out of the way and go somewhere else, because now this is a constant. Whereas over here, this is the constant. So when I move these over here, when I move this over here, it forces this to move. It's the opposite reaction. It's the reaction that we're counting on. So in this 32 key system, I only needed to make 2 KBAs because I only needed 32 keys. So now my system is based on 2 KBAs. Okay? If you need a system of 1 master and 32 changes, you've got it. The key concept here is that in TPP, there is but one KBA in rotating constant. For every instance where you rotate a constant, you create a new KBA. And this new KBA is in addition to every KBA you created previously. It's a part of the family. It's a complete equal component. The great concept is that should your client's needs grow, you can, assuming the expansion allows it, simply create an additional KBA by rotating a constant. So what I mean is, the guy wants 10 more keys? Fine. Rotate a constant. Move this column over here, force the progressives over here, and now you literally have just created another 32 keys. Okay? And so if your mind starts to think, okay, well, where does that end? Well, now it's over here, move it over here. Now it's over here, move it over here. But guess what? You can start to drag this one along too. The question now becomes is, how many patterns can I get when I'm rotating 4 chambers of constants? How many patterns will this create? So it's 16 keys per KBA, but how many KBAs can I create? And we're going to give you that answer because it's pretty cool. So the key takeaway here is every time you rotate a constant or rotate them both, you move both of them, or you force the chambers with progressives in it to evacuate and go somewhere else, that's a rotation. Now, if you recall earlier, I said you can never have a different quantity of cuts in common with the TMK in a single system. So what that means is, In this system, I have 4 constants. I must always stay with 4 constants. It doesn't matter what chambers are the constants. We could have these two as progressives. We could have 1 and 3, 1 and 4, 1 and 5, 1 and 6, 2 and 3, 2 and 4, 2 and 5, 2 and 6, 3 and 4, 3 and 5, 3 and 6, 4 and 5, 4 and 6. Okay, 5 and 6. You get the idea. You run through all the iterations of that, and that's how many total keys. Each of those iterations times 16 is your theoretical number. You've used substantially less master pins. Everything's more secure, and it's done faster. And it's in the spirit of the governing document, the ANSI standard. So every new KBA you create is an addition. The great concept is if the client's needs grow, great, rotate a constant. Assuming your client doesn't come to you and say, I need 6,000 keys. Okay, I need 1,800 keys. You didn't plan for that. This isn't going to work. So you're going to have to start over because there's a maximum number of the quantity of KBAs multiplied by how many keys each can produce. And that's where that Pascal's triangle comes in. So the question you might have is, how many times can I rotate these constants? The above 2 KBAs are part of what would be called a 4 in 6 rotating constant system, as there are 4 constants in a 6-pin cylinder. To arrive at the answer, we can look at a chart. And all authoritative works on the subject of advanced master keying will develop and write out all the variations of rotating constant patterns. So therefore, there's no reason for me to beleaguer you with them here. Meaning, any locksmith book, if you're going to actually do this stuff, you're going to buy a real locksmithing book. Jerome Andrews, Don O'Shell, Billy B. Edwards, and Ralph Forrest Ball has a book. Although I don't own it, I can't find it. I'm going to email him someday and ask where I can get it. All these guys, these experts, they in the book will give you all variations. You can rotate all your columns except one. If you rotated all your columns, if you progressed all your columns, that's not rotating rotating constant because it's TPP. But you can rotate one chamber all the way up to almost all the chambers except one. You can rotate them all except one, or just one, and however many are in between, 5-pin, 6-pin, 7-pin cylinders. So I don't know in memory how to do this. I would never try to commit the patterns of rotating constants to memory. I would just pull out one of my books. I'd look in Jerome's book or Don O'Shell's book, and I would know. That's just how I would do it. The question you might have is, how many times can we rotate it? To arrive at the answer, you look at an authoritative book. I'm not going to bother you with that here. Showing all the possible ways to write our 4 and 6 system as seen here, I've expanded that for us to look at. So this is a 4 and 6 system. This is our system. Okay? This is literally our system. This was my first KBA. This was my second KBA. The X's are your constants. The empty spots are your progressions. So XXXX, which really was circle, 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 circle. Let's look again. XXXXX. I should have put X's there. And then columns 5 and 6, and then columns 4 and 6. So if we go back to our cheat sheet, columns 5 and 6 are progressed, columns 4 and 6. So how many is that? Well, it's 15. I just happen to know that. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15. So what is 15 times 16? That is 240. So you can get 240 theoretical keys out of a 4 and 6 system. If you only need 100, why would you use TPP? Why would you ever do that? You wouldn't. Less secure, takes longer, more waste. Now imagine if this was a table that had 1x, or 2x's, or 3, or 4, or 5, or 6 if it was a 7-pin, or 4 if it was a 5-pin. You get my point. It could be any quantity there. The absolute supreme rule is that you can't mix a 4 and 6 system with a 3 and 6 system. You will have interchange. We can and then I can write out the 15 possible combinations of our 4 and 6 system, which I did. They're all here. All I did was just cycle through all I did was cycle through 4 and 6, pardon me, 5 and 6, 4 and 6, 4 and 5, 3 and 6, 3 and 5, 3 and 4, and I just cycled through all of those iterations. That's it. So it's not work that you should commit to memory. You should just know where to find, as we do in DHI, just know where to find the answer. And ALOA as well. So this is Pascal's triangle here. I don't know, what are we doing here, computer? Okay, had to do a reboot there. So I'm about to show you Pascal's triangle. And this is not hard to learn. It's weird, but it's not hard to learn. So if you remember, just remember that we did a 4 and 6 system. We knew that there were 15 iterations and that there were 16 keys per iteration. So just to give you an anchor point, there were 4 constants, 4, in a 6-pin system. 4 and 6. Go to that box. We know that there were 15 iterations. Each iteration gave us 16 keys. 15 times 16 is 240. So the way that Pascal's triangle is used, I don't know. I think Pascal was a mathematician. I'm sure that I learned about him at some point in high school. The name is vaguely familiar. I thank him for his contributions, for as esteemed as they certainly are, and allows me to be lazy. I'll just, consult his work. So here's how you use this to your advantage. How many keys do you need to produce? Or better said, how many keys plus expansion possibility do you need to have? Your client says, I need 500 keys. Will a 4 and 6 system work? Nope. Is a 3 and 6 system going to work? Sure. It's lots of expansion. It's over, it's 600%, 650% expansion. When you look at other possibilities, if you're dealing with a 6-pin cylinder, you're in this row. So 500 won't work in 4, it will work in 3, so 3 constants. Now, what's cool about rotating constant in a level 2 system is you will produce more change keys compared to total position progression. You'll use less master pins. And remember, every master pin you don't use, you reduce those incidentals by half. So 4096, 0 constants in a 6-pin cylinder, that's total position progression. This column is total position progression because there are no constants. But you can get 6144 if you have 1 constant. You'll have master pins in the other 5 chambers, but you won't in 1. That'll give you 50% more change keys than you can in total position progression, and it's more secure. But the point is depending on how large your system is, how many chambers your cylinder is, you then determine how many constants you'll use. So once you use Pascal's triangle to determine your X and Y system, your 4 and 6, let's say, or your 3 and 6. You'll then consult an authoritative work, if you were doing this work yourself, on what the patterns are. Now, you can sit with a piece of graph paper and just work out all the different patterns. As Lloyd Selber says, it's fun. I find it dastardly because I always forget one or two, and I know that there are 20 patterns, but I can only get 19. I've done that. Doesn't matter as long as you've not repeated one. 3 and 6 gives you 20 patterns. And there are other patterns in Pascal's triangle that you can pick out. I won't bother you with that here, but so that's the question. That's how you wield this. How many keys do you need, including expansion specification? How many chambers are in your cylinders? That's how many constants you're going to use. So it's that easy. Using Pascal's triangle is easy if you learn it quickly, and I refer to it additional times as we progress through this primer, meaning I will refer back to it. Looking at the triangle, you look at the number of constants on the right side, and then you look at the number of chambers on the left, where these two intersect. For our 4 and 6 system, you'll see the numbers 15, 16 to 40. Again, the 15 represents that there will be 15 iterations of our KBA when rotating 4 constants through a 6-pin cylinder. There will be 16 changes per KBA for 240 total keys. So your customer could have a system that starts out with 32 keys. Okay, progress 2 KBAs. But you know that you're going to have 3 more of those. Great. You just progress on. You create a new KBA by shifting over a constant column or moving a progressive column. You think of it that way. As it turns out, regardless of how you answer this question, how many patterns a 4 and 6 system can derive, the answer is 15. These 15 KBAs produce 240 unique change keys. Absolute unique change keys. Therefore, I ask you, if you have a system, say a 2-level system, where you require 100 change keys, why would you use TPP? You wouldn't. You now know that you're not going to use TPP ever in your life because you've just learned a better way. You reduce the physical security of each key in every cylinder, and you load hundreds of additional unnecessary master pins, creating an epic quantity of incidental keys. Remember what Ralph said earlier. I forget his number. Was it 11,000 incidentals in a 4,000 key system? That's a question you go to your client and say, well, only if you can serve it in a different key system, I suppose. But your job of pointing out the detrimental weaknesses in mechanical keying, I think, is part of our job. This is how you become familiar with it, I guess. I started out bragging how RC is capable of more change keys than TPP, but a 4 and 6 can only yield 240. If your system calls for more, you have to change the 4 and 6. The thing is, you have to know that before you start. You can't change a 4 and 6. You're locked. You're locked into 15 iterations, 16 keys per KBA, 240 total change keys. You can't in that same system say, let's rotate 3. Go to a 3 and 6. That'll sink the ship. Looking again at Pascal's triangle, select your column on the left of how many chambers you are working with. We're working with 6 pin cylinders in this primer. Therefore, look at the row of 6 chambers and stop at the number of constants in their respective columns that will suit the needs today, allowing for a 50% expansion for the future. And that is the X in Y system you use, the 4 and 6, the 3 and 6. 6-pin TPP 2-step 10 depth produces 4096. We know this from before. You need more? Fine. Use a 1 and 6 system. 1 and 6, 6,044 keys. You get in a 7-pin, and that's why people go to 7-pin, because you need more biddings. But that just gets massive. I mean, what is, and this is This is a two-step. Imagine if it was a one-step. I should have said that. Pascal's triangle, you've got one-step and two-step versions. And you can build it yourself. You now know how to build it. You can, kind of pick from this the logic of how it's built. But this is just for two-step systems. You wouldn't use this for Corbin System 70. You get a lot more out of that. Let's see. If we were to talk about that, obviously, this first situation here is going to be 155, 120, 20. No, I'm sorry, 125, 25, 125, 125. You get the idea. It'll get much bigger at the end. So this is just for two-step. Anyone who's two-step. So need more? Use a 1 in 6 system. It will produce 6 KBAs with 1,024 change keys per KBA for a total of 6,144 right here. 1 in 6. 1 in 6. Again, physically more secure by using far less master pins, measurably less key interchange as a result, and you are creating a key system in the spirit of what the ANSI standard specifies. As each time we rotate a constant, we get more keys until we have rotated through every possible combination that our X and Y system allows. Rotating constants is a subject of study all to its own. And my purpose was to show you an introduction to it. I think a solid introduction. And now you realize, okay, there can be lots of ways to rotate this. The point was to make you aware of it and perhaps pique your interest to learn more. If you are so inclined, there are several studies done by authorities on the matter, and the one I would suggest is Don O'Shell's Definitive Guide to Rotating Constant Master Keying. And what makes a lot of these books so thick, this book is thicker than average, it's just because Mr. O'Shell, progressed out everything. He's got entire progression, sequence of standard progression pages in there. It's not, it wouldn't be a master keying book in the sense of here are the biddings that you can use, but it is fully derived so that if you are not sure how a system works, if you study where the numbers are, a book like this will teach you how to do all of it. I do own this book, and I have read it. I haven't studied every KBA or every page of a standard progression format. There's no reason to do that. But that would be a good one. Now, the next method of progression is called limited position. Let's pause and pick up this video again. So everything after rotating constant is super easy. It's so easy that it's not even worth talking about. But we're going to because it's fun. The next method of progression is called limited position progression, LPP, and simply stated, it is where you choose to progress certain chambers and keep other chambers constant. Okay, sounds like it's rotating constant. Think of LPP as, or it sounds like TPP, but I'm not going to progress every chamber. Think of it either way. Think of LPP as using one and only one KBA of a rotating constant system, meaning the chambers that are held progressed and the chambers that are held constant do not change. This is a great way when you are creating a system that's relatively small in size, where you do not need the larger capacities afforded by TPP or RC. We have learned that if you progress one column, you get 4 changes in a two-step system. If you progress 2, you get 16, 364, then 256, then 1024, then finally 4096. Based on your system requirement, for change keys, simply select the number of columns you must progress. Progress that KBA and you are finished. Let's say I've got a guy comes in, needs 10 locks, keyed differently and master keyed. Great. Don't dare load master pins in every chamber. Just use limited position progression. Okay? You see this all the time. If he were to come back and say, oh my gosh, a year from now, I need 10 more keys. Okay, I can do that. Just rotate a constant. Now your system's rotating constant, but it can start out as LPP, limited position progression. Now, I don't get into it, but you could also do this. If you don't like number 2 master pins, don't use them. In this system, you could literally, if the client needs 10 keys, you could get rid of one of these progressives. You could get rid of the 2. So you would have 3 times 4 is 12. You would have 12 keys. Or, so what I'm saying is, don't use a progression possibility that's going to force you to use a pin that you don't want to use. So let's say you don't like using number 2 master pins because it's Schlage F locks and the keys are worn and you know a pin's going to get stuck. Everything's worn. Well, then don't use them. Go 3 apart everywhere. So make this 3, make this 6. You're done. Don't use anything else. Well, or use 9. That would be fine. Over here, you could use a 2 and an 8. That's only going to give you 6 keys. Well, you need 10. Over here, use a 5, use an 8. So now it's 3 times 2 times 2. That's 12. You need more? Over here, use a 2. That'll give you another key. Over here, use a 1 and a 7. The point is, you can use thicker master pins, create a KBA where you don't use every possible key number that's available theoretically. Just use the ones you want to use. Your pin kit might be low in number 2 master pins. You forgot to order them, so now you're stuck with number 3 master pins. That's fine. Have you ever stacked 2 master pins together to make one other master pin? I have. The problem with that is it creates incidentals. You don't want to do that. So this is limited position progression. Guy needs 10 keys. Let's do it. Here you go. I know in the back of my head I can give him 240 keys if I need to. If he's going to keep coming back and he doesn't want to tell me today how big the system will be because he doesn't know. In the above KBA, you get a 2-level system, 16 changes, no max. Just the way that worked out. Yeah, no max violations in Schlage. And none of the change keys can be turned or filed down into a TMK as we have a 0 up in the TMK. You can't take any of the change keys and turn it into a top master key because you can't. All the cuts are too deep in this column. That's why a 0 or the shallowest is used. What if we wanted to use LPP in the context of our prior office building example? If you recall from our prior study, we had a 3-floor small office building where the GMK operates everything. 1 master key operates per floor, hence the 3 master keys, and each floor requires 8 change keys under each master. Your expansion specification is 138. You can still use LPP for that. Here it is. So 138, right? That's what we said, 138. So it's hard to see from this what that means, but I'm just going to progress these for my masters. So my TMK is 470529. My first master is 670529, then 870529, 070529, and if I need a fourth, I don't, 270529. Then my change keys under this master, the 670529, are going to be 670749, 670769, 670789, 709. That one I wouldn't use. That's a max violation. And then it's going to be 670-949, 969, 989, 9, wouldn't use 909. You get the point. Then the second master key is 870-749, 870-769, 870-789. You get the point. Limited position progression. I have used 3 less master pins in every single cylinder. I took the liberty of deriving all of those for our 138. 470529 was our TMK. 670529, 870529, 070529, 680. Underneath are all of my change keys. Okay, max are in red. Do I get enough? Yep. Yes, I do. Client needed 10, 4, 7, 11, right? Yeah, something like that. So I get enough. What happens if I need more? Well, rotate a constant. Move this column over here. Everything else stays the same. The point is you're not adding a progressive column. You're not making it, so think of it this way. Think of and Ralph would call it a brick wall. Think of a wall somewhere here. This is the beauty of rotating constant because it can expand. If you start out small, you can usually expand it. So somewhere you'll have to think of a wall. I would probably put the wall here because that means I could get a total of 16 if I kept everything to the left of the wall for masters and everything to the right of the wall for changes, I could get a total of 16 masters and 256 changes. So client needs 10 keys. It's likely he's going to have to rekey something. So in the future, you're probably going to have to do something. The point of this is monetization of your knowledge. Guy comes into me, wants to do a system, comes in and needs 20 more. The majority of distributors are going to handle that work are not going to be able to do it. I'm going to get all that business from you every single time. So don't let me take that business from you. Had a call from a client today, a locksmith outside of Detroit, dealing with a Hager system, and we'd gone over Hager a little bit earlier, and he works on his client are shelters, and they have a Hager system in place, H1 keyways, and doesn't have the knowledge of how that system works. I do. I possess a working knowledge of Hager's key system. He called many people in his area. No one had any idea what he was talking about. They didn't even know Hager had a keyway. Found me online, and we talked for a little while, got them all set up. It turned into a multiplex system because that's actually what he wanted and what his client wanted. Knowledge equals monetization, as Dawn from Aloha says. The more you learn, the more you earn. So you see the max losses above. If you learn later you need more changes, as you will as the need arises to rekey cylinders, rekey cylinders develops over time. Immediately when seeing these max losses, I would have progressed 3 chambers rather than just 2 to give me 64 theoretical changes right off the bat. So what I'm saying is, when I would have tried this, I would have seen I'm only getting 11 keys. I would not have done that. I would have automatically progressed a 3rd column on my change key side of my imaginary wall. But I can do that in the future, but I just would have written the system originally that way. Because I probably going to, unless I never see the customer again, I'm probably going to have to. But if you push forward with progressing 2 chambers, this is not a problem. As I said earlier, just rotate a constant. The change key side of your KBA would become a 3 and 5 system. 3 and 5 systems gives you 10 ways to rotate. How do I know that? I only know it because I can look at Pascal's triangle. 3 and 5. 10 ways to rotate. Right there. So what I'm saying is, think of, obviously calling it 3 and 5, I'm building my brick wall here, is what I'm doing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I could have called it a 3 and 4. How many would 3 and 4? Actually, no, it would be 1 and 4. It'd be a 1 and 4 system. 1 in 4 would be 256 keys I could get out of that. Just look at Pascal's triangle, 10 rotations, 16 keys per rotation, 160 keys. Easy peasy. That's a technical term. I would like to mention an instance where you can limit your progression, though I would not call it LPP. A KBA can feature an intent of where you progress only a partial quantity of progression possibilities in a given chamber. I just talked about that. Don't do all 4, do 3 or do 2. For instance, if you are working with a master key that is prone to excessive max losses, such as a 0 or 1 cut, or a master with a 0 or 8 or 9 cut, simply drop from the progressives. Those simply drop from the progression chambers those cuts that will cause those max violations. Don't use it in the first place. For instance, take this KBA. You can see this version of the KBA where I've highlighted the adjacent cut combinations, what would create max greater than 7. So I took this KBA. These are the offending cuts, 0 to 9, 9 to 0. Therefore, in a certain sense, we can engage in LPP where we drop those violating cuts. Looking at the above KBA, we do not need to drop all violating cuts. You don't need to drop any, but I'm just saying, why deal with them? As long as the quantity of keys you need are there. Of the 2 pairs that are adjacent, we need to drop just 1 of each pair. One of these has to go. The 9 or the 0. Or the 0 or the 9. Let's drop the 9 in chamber 2 and the 0 in chamber 5. While the KBA will produce substantially less, 50% in fact, theoreticals, you're going to be left with this KBA. I've just pulled out the offender. Okay, you only needed 200 keys anyway, so there you go, which you wouldn't be using total position progression. But the point is, drawing it like TPP just allows you to illustrate, allows you to understand you can do that. Now, the next system is the matrix format. As I've said a couple of times, it's really not a system of progression as much as it's a neat way to derive biddings, and it's so cool that you should be aware of it. But you might use it on a small system. So let's talk about that now. We'll talk about matrix. Okay, the next system of progression we will discuss is the matrix format. I think it's really okay to leave it out altogether, but it's so neat that I'd like to show it to you and maybe, again, pique your interest to do further study. And there's really nowhere else to stuff it into, I think, other than methods of progression. So the next system of progression is the matrix format. While I do not have all the facts as to who discovered the matrix format or method of progression, I believe the discoverer of the matrix format is Billy B. Edwards, Jr., CML. If he's not the discoverer, I believe he's the founding father. And his book, Master Keying by the Numbers, will prove the primary source for further study, at least that I'm aware of. I'm not sure of any other document that goes into it as deeply as that document does, that book. At the very, very end, I'll show you the important works in my Locksmith library. That if you were going to dive deeper, those are those will be the books that I've referred to. His system perhaps is not true progression, but it does represent to some an easier way to pull change keys from a system whilst at the same time keeping excellent compact record keeping. The matrix format is usually assuming you are using LPP or RC method or progression so as to prevent the quantity of matrices from getting unruly. Let's say you will be doing an RC system, but you have an immediate need for only 8 change keys. Therefore, it starts out as LPP, but the future possible need may be for another 32 change keys, which would evolve this LPP into an RC system, which we just really touched on. We could use our KBA from previous study as seen here. Okay, same thing we've looked at. We also know every key in our change key will have 4705 in chambers 1 through 4. The matrix format renders it easy and fun to come up with the 16 change keys, and here is how. Mr. Edwards in his book recounts how he developed this method, and here is a retelling of it. Mr. Edwards simply built a matrix for chambers 5 and 6. If we did so as well following his lead, our KBA would look like this. So what I'm showing you is a matrix or a KBA, and all that I'm showing you is cut a chamber 5 and chamber 6. You'll notice the progressives for chamber 5 are 4680 and 1357. If we go up to our KBA, 4680 for chamber 5, 1357 for chamber 6. So it's going to look like this. Okay. So what we've established is we know every one of our change keys will start with 4705. That just comes from here. And we know that we can get 16 keys out of this. So it would make sense that we have 4 columns and 4 rows. So there's a pattern. The above matrix governs only chambers 5 and 6. This is so as chambers 1 through 4. This is so as chambers 1 through 4 are constant. The beauty of the matrix format is in the elegant way we can progress chambers 5 and 6. Let's say I want to harvest my 8 required change keys. I would randomly select squares above and fill in our SKCS symbols into those squares as seen here, and then when you see this it will make it obvious how this works. I need 8 keys, and all I did was put my whatchamacallits, my SKCSs, into random boxes. Now you see where this is going. 4705, what's 1AA? Well, it's 43 because that's 1AA. What's 2AA? 4705 67 right there. It's a nice easy way to see what you've assigned and what's left. So is it progression? Yeah, it kind of is, because you're progressing those chambers that you are progressing using this very graphical method. And I find, and while I've not used it extensively in the shop, if I hand someone a note that says all your keys are going to start with 4705, now pick a box. Okay, and that's your remaining chambers. So it now becomes obvious if you're going to run this into a rotating constant system where you're going to move the constant 4 chamber to a constant 5 chamber and therefore kick these over here, you're going to have a new matrix. You're going to have a 4 and 6 cut. And then you're going to have new 4 and 6 here. Same concept. And these are our 8 progressed keys. So we know it's 4705, 43, so for 1AA. 4705, 43 for 1AA, right here. Okay. Again, progression? Yeah, I think it is, because you're progressing those chambers. You can go in the logical format. 4705, 41, 43, 45, 47, 61, 63, 65, 67. You get the idea. So let's push on. The method is that you randomly select a square. That randomly selected square will provide you with cuts 5 and 6 for your change keys. Suffice it to say, the matrix format concept can be expanded to meet your progressing requirements by simply increasing the size of the matrices required for the project. And each column and or row can handle more than one chamber at a time. So I literally could, if I had a 2 and 6 system, I could have this 3 and 4, and I'll have 3 and 4, and this 5 and 6. And then in each box, I'll have every possibility of cuts in chambers 3 and 4 here, and every possibility of cuts in chambers 5 and 6. And in a two-step 10-depth system, I'm going to have 16 columns and 16 rows. So I won't show you an example of that because, that we've touched on it. You're aware of it now. If you want to further research it, there's no justice I could do in regurgitating the work of the master of it. Suffice it to say, the matrix format can be expanded by simply increasing the size of the matrices required for the project, and each column and or row can handle more than one chamber at a time. As I said earlier, the authoritative work is Master Keying by the Numbers by Billy B. Edwards Jr., CML, and should your curiosity push you to learn more, I suggest you purchase the book here. This is where you can buy it. I have his Master Keying by the Numbers and the Core of the Matter, and I'll tell you, I deeply leaned into the Core of the Matter when I was studying for the large format interchangeable core ALOA exam, and I took the ALOA's class. William Link CML taught it, and that textbook was obviously a reflection of the subject matter. But this book here is really interesting. There is information in this book that is not elsewhere that I found, and it has a very interesting couple of authors. Billy Edwards finished the book, but he wasn't the person who started the book. And the person who started the book was equally as magnificent in his command of the subject matter, and I'll leave that mystery to you should you want to go further. If you're going to get into large format, you should definitely consider this book as well. I've emailed him. He's responded. I've sent money. Books arrive. It's all good. And I would suggest that you, if you have any interest, that this would be 2 mandatory pieces in your library. And uncommon, now we're moving on. Selective Master Keying. And I'm going to show it because I don't think you'll ever get into it, but you're going to see things that look like this. It's not difficult. An uncommon method of progression is called selective master keying. I will not delve deeply into this method as it is an advanced topic, but I will say this method is for very small systems of about 24 keys, does require a KBA and a TMK, but in this instance, the TMK only theoretically exists. Therefore, it's called a theoretical master key and not a top master key, as has been said earlier. And the change keys are selective master keys of this theoretical master key. Really heady topics. You will never actually cut the TMK as it acts as the foundation only upon which to create biddings. The change keys are always one cut away from the TMK. This method allows great flexibility as the keys are permitted to work a cylinder or specifically not permitted to work in a cylinder by means of how the cylinder is pinned. If you remember back to my 3-level rotating constant system I wrote for that locksmith in Volusia County, I mentioned selective master keying. I treated the master as if it was a selective because I didn't allow the 0 cut in the TMK to be used in the KBA, and all I had to do was pin that chamber, or what he had to do was pin that chamber, 0 bottom pin, and then add a master. So that's all I did to create a 3-level system. I treated that TMK as a selective. So this is something that you may have seen or seen in the past. The change keys are always, this method is common outside of the United States and allows you to easily key a key system that looks not unlike this. And when I say common, I've been told it's common outside of the United States by people who work outside of the United States. And I have seen this format in manufacturers' literature whose headquarters aren't in the United States. And basically the concept is, here's your key number, doesn't matter, 1AA, 2AA, 3A, 4A, whatever. Here's your door number. And then what someone's going to do is the owner of the property, and I've seen this format brought to me, carpenter's pencil on a piece of cardboard. I want key 1 to work in these doors. Okay. I want door 2 to work in these doors. Okay. And by this time, I'm trying to find a pattern to figure out how I'm going to pin this, and it's impossible to figure it out. But there is an easy way, a quite simple way. The simple and easy way is that you create a TMK, and then you make every key that you're going to cut, as I said earlier, the change keys are always one cut away from the TMK. So if you've got 6 chambers and you've got 4 progression possibilities, you don't have a tremendous amount of expansion that you can do in this system, but you can key small systems with it. Thoroughly advanced topic, but I do mention it only because if you see someone bring you something like this is what I want, and you say no, 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 well, you can. It will require not insignificant further study. Progressing keys for a system schematic as drawn is surprisingly easy, though I will leave it as an advanced topic for you to discover. It's called selective master keying. While I doubt you will ever have to combinate cylinders based on the above matrix, I would be surprised if you've never seen a client provide you with such a matrix. They won't call it that, but they're going to say, door 1 has to work on these key numbers, written on a scrap of paper with a carpenter's pencil. And as you will see such a representation for the first time, you might wonder, as I did, is this a real thing? Selective master keying easily tackles this type of system, so if you encounter it, all hope is not lost. So the final word on progression is to mention the shoebox method, which is no method of progression whatsoever and expressly prohibited in the ANSI standard. In fact, it is a system by which you use completely random keys, as if you had a shoebox full of cut keys and you pulled them at random. It's literally that. If you've got an old wooden cask full of cut keys that have been sitting there since 1962, you pull a key out at random. That's shoebox. Let's explore why this is an awful idea. In Google Sheets or Excel or OpenOffice or just manually, I used this function. I should have had rand between 0, 1, but whatever. Function, and came up with the following. Think of this as a matrix, as 16 cut keys you pulled from that pile of random keys. So I've got our TMK, 470529. I pulled a key out of the box. It was 181513. Okay. I've got 695729, another random key. And all of these random keys, these 16 random keys. I didn't pull keys out of a shoebox. I used Excel to create 6 columns of random numbers between 1 and 9. Oh, actually, no. I do have some zeros here. So, as you can see, I added SKCS to the right side. And our TMK for convenience up here. If you proceed to key this system, you would find using 1AA would require you to work with completely empty chambers in 2, 3, and 5. Can't key it here, can't key it here, can't key it here. You need a number 1 master pin. Doesn't exist in Schlage. Moving on to 2AA, you can use this. 2AA is 695729. That works with the master if you study that. You'd have no problem. Except you've got 2 cuts in common with the TMK. Are you doing a rotating constant system or limited progression? Maybe. If you're doing total position progression, you've got problems immediately, or you will, because you can't share those cuts. 3AA cannot be used because, again, you'd need a number 1 master pin, which doesn't exist, and these incompatibilities continue. In fact, from 16 randomly pulled keys from the above list, only 3AA and 11AA can be used. In fact, I had to generate another 20 random numbers to only come up with 2 additional change keys. I then looked at an additional 40 random numbers, and none were permissible to use without breaking basic rules of combinating cylinders or ensuring against interchange, as interchange is what all locksmiths fear. It's a fear. Interchange is a paralyzing fear if you don't possess an advanced grasp of the science of locksmithing. If you do, there's no fear at all because you know the watertight nature of the science of locksmithing. But getting there requires quite the commitment. The reason I looked at 80 keys to get only 4 changes is because I was checking for key interchange, which means I was looking at the possible pinning chart for all the biddings in case there was a need for Meson keying or the like. If you are just looking to make the TMK into random key work and not scrutinizing all other keys, sooner or later pulling random keys will force poor locksmithing choices and will allow interchange to creep into the system. You have learned a better way to progress safely key biddings and would never need a shoebox a system together. I'm going to, probably 2 more segments to this video will exist. One will be just a on-camera conclusion, and I'll probably have a little doodad where I'm just quickly writing, showing you how to write out, rotating constant, limited position progression on graph paper. Let's move on. We'll do some practical examples of our methods of progression, and if we recall, we are dealing with TPP, we're dealing with RC, we're dealing with LPP, I think we had matrix, I think we had selective, and I think we had shoebox. 6 methods, I think. Yeah. So total position progression, we've got that. We know what we're talking about. Now, rotating constant, this is a worksheet that we used earlier, but we're going to use our same 470529 master. So we'll just write this out. And I'm only giving it an extra column here just for the, identifying of what the TMK is and what the SOP is, TMK. So with rotating constant, the way that you would do this would be simply to, let's say that we're doing a system where we have 5 constants. And if we refer back to Pascal's triangle, we'll know how many patterns there are. But if we were doing 5 constants, that means that the x's are going to be constant. So how many patterns of this will there be? So let me draw it here. 4, 7, 0, 5, 2, 9. If the x's are constants, then this is the first pattern. Okay, this would be progressed, these would all be constants. I'm not going to write them all out because it will get nuts. Just to write out a KBA for all 5 of these, for all 6 of these patterns. There'll be 6 patterns because we're basically going to take the progression and we're just going to cycle it through. So x, 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 blank, x. I missed one. Yeah, I did. I screwed it up. Very typical for me to have to check my work. It's just the locksmith I am. Help me a little bit if I write it so I can see. Okay, there are 6 patterns, and the only thing that's happened is the position of the progression has just simply moved through the possible ways that we would have a rotating constant system where we've got one chamber that's going to be progressed. So in this system, if a customer comes in and he needs a master key and he needs 3 change keys, this is your system. You're going to have 3 KBAs. You're going to have 5 master pins in every single system, every single cylinder. Super secure. You're only going to have 1 master pin. So there's literally no way in the world that you need to load master pins into every chamber. 69274144345. There'd be no reason to have any of that stuff. So you wouldn't do it this way. And again, if we were going to have the 15 patterns where we have 2 positions or 4 positions that are constant, 470529 rotated. And I don't do this nearly enough to be great at it, and I'm not going to attempt to write out all 15 patterns. I'll be here for an hour trying to figure it out. I just definitely refer to charts, someone's excellent locksmithing work. See, I've screwed it up. I went from 2 to 1, so that's no good. Anyway, just to not walk away feeling like a fool. Okay, so then we will move this. What are we going to do? Let's move this here. Oh, God. All right, back up to the top. Okay, so now I've got these 2 as progressives. I'm going to simply shift this one over. That doesn't belong there. That's the mistake I'm making. Then the next one is going to be, we'll shift this one over one more to the 5 column. Those 2 are empty. Okay, then we can move this over. Then basically, I drew the same thing. X, 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 space X. That company placed an order today. 5 blank X space. Yeah, we're getting it. So these 2 are progressives. 5 and 6, 4 and 6, 3 and 6, 2 and 6. I should have left that blank. So sorry. And then it would be 1 and 6 would be blank. So here's the first 5 patterns. That should be blank. Okay, so I basically just cycled that through, and then you continue to work through the rest of the patterns, or you do what I do, because I'm obviously not very good at this. I just refer to Jerome Andrews' book or Don O'Shell's book. There's lots of books that just show these patterns, and that's what I would do. The point is, every time you change a pattern, you've got a new KBA. So in this 5 and 6 system, there's 6 KBAs. In our 4 and 6 system, there's 15 KBAs. I'm sorry, did I say 5? 6. There are 6 KBAs. Then there are 15 KBAs in the 4 and 6 system, and then Pascal's triangle for the rest. So in this super simple system here, your first KBA is going to look just like this. You're going to progress, and then the rest of these are just all constant. I use little circles. Use whatever you like. The little circles was easy for me to do on AutoCAD when I drew those drawings. So that's my first KBA. That's this one. Well, here's this one. So circle, 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 circle. 4680. The cool thing about the customer that comes in, so this is pattern 1, this is pattern 2, and you've got 4 more patterns. We're going to swap this constant over to the 5th column, and you get the picture. The cool thing about rotating constant is I can turn this into a system that's going to give me 24 keys. Why 24? 4 per pattern. There are 6 patterns. So if your customer comes in and needs a master and 3 keys, then he shows up a month later and said, yeah, I need 3 more master. I need 3 more change keys under the same master. Okay. Wish you would have told me that, but you're not locked in. I mean, you're not locked in total position progression either. You can just keep progressing. You can just keep pulling biddings. But this is a secure way. And if you see a customer that comes in like that a month later and needs 3 more, you need to stop and say, listen, how big is this system going to get? Because based on how you started it, without any knowledge, you can only give them 24 change keys. If they come back and they see another, they say, I'm going to need 100. Yeah, you've got to bring back those first 3 locks. You've got to start over with a rotating constant system that will give you a bigger ultimate capacity. And again, you would refer to Pascal's triangle. You're going to have the number of patterns in the upper left-hand corner, the number of change keys per pattern, and that will give you the total number of keys. So if I recall correctly, in our 4 and 6 system, it was 15 and 16 and 240. Okay? So you'll pick out of Pascal's triangle the right size system to go with. That's rotating constant, practical example. Now, limited position progression, it's just too easy. If you know that it is a tiny system, it's a house. It's literally a house, and they want a master key, and they want a key for the garage that's different than the key for the house, and maybe the shed. Who knows? And it will never grow into a larger system because it's a house. You would just use, it's going to be called limited position progression. But if you were to then, if this was your limited position progression system, if you had to do more, then it becomes rotating constant. Limited position progression is basically the idea that you're going to take total position progression, but you are going to treat all of these or whatever as constants. Now, another example of it could be something like, and we had talked, I had mentioned it briefly before, limited position progression could also be, yeah, we'll just draw it like this. I had mentioned it earlier. And let's say that you know the system is only going to be 12 keys. Okay? So many ways to do that when it comes to progressing. But let's say you want to use number 4 master pins or whatever. So if you want to use number 4 master pins, I mean, I wouldn't use all number 4 master pins, but let's say you wanted to use what I'm trying to say is you want to use a thicker pin. Okay, make this a 5. And don't do anything else here in this column. And then over here, you want to use, number 5 master pin. Nice thick masters. 7. Don't do anything else over here. Over here, you can make it a 9. Over here, you can make it a 4. No, let's make it a 7. Give you a big giant master pin there. Over here, you can make it a make it a 3. That'll give you a 4 master. Then over here, you might want to progress more of these to give you more change keys. So you're going to say that this is going to be a 7 and 0. So you can have a 4 master and a 3 master. The point is how many keys would this limited position progression give you? System. It would give you 2 times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1. The point of the matter is you're not going to get very many keys out of this. Okay? there's no reason to necessarily do it this way at all. So the way that you would end up doing it is that you would fill in, you would leave constants, and that you would only maybe put, you would, rather than go straight across, you would add a, let's say that, well, 2 keys is obviously not enough. So let's say that we're going to do, let's put a 1 here, and let's make this a, we'll leave that one alone. Let's make this a 1 over here, and then over here we can put a 4, and over in this column we can put a, don't really like any of them. Oh, well, you know what? Because we're doing limited position progression, we can break a rule. We can break parity. We can use an even number with these odd numbers here. So now how many keys do we get? 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 1 times 2. 4, 8, 8, 16. So now you've got 16 keys. Limited position progression. Why you want to do that? You want to use thicker master pins. Why? Well, your cylinder, it's a Schlage F-Series job, and the zinc plugs are worn. The thing, literally the chambers, I've seen them get ovalized. I've seen them literally get ovalized like this in the direction of turning. So here's your cylinder plug. I've literally seen them get like this. Okay, you want to use thicker master pins. So you'd create a KBA like this. You know, if you needed 32 keys, come up with another progressive somewhere. You know, don't make this a 9 and then add a 6. So limited progression is what you're doing here, just to accomplish the job that you want to do for whatever reason you want to do it. You don't need, you know, so much capacity. I probably wouldn't write it like this. I would probably choose to give me the 16 keys I need by giving me maybe, if using thick master pins was the concept, getting as many as you could in the center chambers where the key movement up and down, the jiggling up and down was, you know, less pronounced in the center here. Lots of reasons why, there are many reasons why you could manipulate the KBA to your advantage. This would be a reason to do so. I would probably use only one giant master pin out here or here if it was a very worn, and I would keep the majority of my progressives towards the center of the cylinder. So limited position progression. Now the matrix format is, you know, we have really shown that in the prior video portion of this chapter, but it is fun. You know, you can draw a matrix, and you've got, you know, so many keys, and let's just forget that one's there. And, you know, and this is going to be your 5th column this way. This will be your 6th column this way. Okay, so you can have your 5th column. I needed that there, so I screwed that up. We need that. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 1, 3, 5, 7. So that shouldn't go there. 3, 5, 7, 9. And then you just write in here, you know, it's 4, 7, 0, 5. And then, you know, here's 1AA, 5, 4. 3AA, or 2AA. 4, 7, 0, 5, 6, 9, and you just fill in the chart. Okay, and you can do this where you have your 5th and 6th chamber here and your 3rd and 4th chamber here, but now you're dealing with double-digit numbers, which means you'll have 16 by 16. That's matrix. So it is in that regard a method of progression. The numbers already exist, but when you lay it out this way, you can say, yeah, that's a method of progression. And then, of course, we talked about selective, and selective is a haughty topic in the sense that it has no place in this primer, but 470, if you remember, that was the one where you had door number, you had, actually it was door number and then key number, and then you had, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, boom, boom, boom. And then somebody just went through and said, I want this key to work. This door, I want here, I want here, and I want here, and these are all lining up with the different numbers. So, but how you actually do that is, it is an advanced topic, but it's the same way of creating a selective key like an ENG key. So what you would do is, we're going to write this out as total position progression. My SOP is down here. Okay, so in this case, the rule for selective master keying was always that a change key needs to be only one cut away from the master. In selective keying, this is your TMK, but in this case, it's a theoretical master key. You're never going to cut this key. It exists only as the center hub of all of the spokes on the wheel. Okay? Without the hub, the wheel doesn't have any shape. So, key number 1 is got to work these weird doors, door 1, door 2, door 3, and door 6. Okay, so our first change key is literally going to be 4, 7, 0, 5, 2, 1. Okay. Then our next key can be 470523, 525, 527. Then the next one can be 470549, 470569, 8909, which max violation. Okay, so now we've got, so the point of the matter is, you're not going to build a very big system when you've got 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4. 24 keys. It's for a small system because every key must be only one cut away from the master, from the theoretical master. So you're going to have 2 1, 2 3, 2 5, 2 7. That's 4 keys. Then you're going to have 4 9, 4 3. I'm sorry. Yes. 4 9, 6 9, 8 9, 0 9. And then you cycle that pattern through until you've used up all the keys. When you derive all the change keys that you can from this system, every change key will only be one cut away from the master. So one cut away means is that everything else is constant. There will be 5 constant chambers. You'll be one cut away, and that is always the rule. And then you can say, okay, this is key 1. This is key 2. And then you take that key, okay, and you simply pin those cylinders. So the pinning chart for the first key is basically just going to be 470521 with an 8 master pin in it. Then the next key is going to have a 6 master pin in it, in the 6th chamber. Then a 4 master pin, then a 2 master pin. Then when you get over here, it's going to have a 2 master here, a 4 master here, a 6 master here, and a 0 bottom pin and a 2 master here. So all those keys are only one cut away from the TMK. The point being is that you're just one cut away, and you're then able to have, absolute isolation from each key. And that's how this would work, this selective style. It's very rare, but you will see something written out like this. The point is you derive the biddings, and then all you do is you program like you just combinate the cylinders in door 1 and door 2 and door 3 and door 6, so that it has the pins necessary so that key 1 works. Anyway, that's what selective is. If you're going to bump into this kind of stuff, you're going to need to participate in ALOA in the classes. I'm glad that I have the knowledge, but I would never pin anything in a selective system because I have a better method, rotating constant. And then, of course, Shoebox, that's just, we've explained that at length previously, and there's no reason to discuss that any further because you would never engage in it. And then ALOA will teach you, if someone comes in and says, I want you to key this, and I want this key to be the master key, that should be a red flag. And in fact, ALOA goes so far to say that you should never permit the customer to tell you what the master key is. When you do that, you don't know what their reasoning is for using that master key. It could be that they're not the owner of the property and you are unwittingly keying up an entire new system where this change key is now acting as the master. So a rule in ALOA is that the customer doesn't tell the locksmith what the master key is. That doesn't happen. Okay, you are building the system. You have to decide what the master key is, or the factory on your behalf would do that. All right, let's wrap up this video on camera. In conclusion, methods of progression. It's probably I was about to say the most advanced topic in the entire primer, and I'm looking at the different chapters, and if you got that far, it should have been a downhill battle if you've gotten that far through understanding the KBA and the standard key coding system and the standard progression format. That's a more heady topic, but all of these things really come together to make the complete package of how the science of creating biddings comes together. So, is it required for you to wield these different skills on a daily basis? Probably not. But if you're doing any locksmithing, then doing it outside of best practice, the term locksmith is an extremely loose term. I've had people call themselves locksmiths that, in my opinion, they have no business calling themselves locksmiths, including myself. I don't we key locks. We key locks all the time. But to me, a locksmith is someone who can do things that require true skill. Learning something and being able to demonstrate that proficiency certainly is a skill. What would impress me more is someone being able to, cut a lever tumbler key, from a steel blank, and do it, with a sealed lock, and you're going to create a key for an antique lock. That's locksmithing. But nonetheless, our object is to make sure that we're adhering to best practices in the industry, and this material is part of it. So the next chapter is called Maison keying. Maison keying, you know it, you've done it, you're aware of it. You may not be aware of the fancy term for it, so let's move on to Maison keying. Thank you for hanging out this far.